Alright, what is up everybody, and welcome back to another video. Today, we are going to be talking about spring bass fishing, and specifically, my top 5 spring power fishing baits. Let's go. Alright guys, so before we even get started, I want you guys to go down to that comment section and drop your top 5 spring power fishing baits. And also, first thing I want to get out of the way, these are by not at all the only power fishing baits I use. But if I only had to pick 5, just 5 power fishing baits for spring bass fishing right now, these were the ones I would choose. So, let's get right into bait 1. Alright guys, so bait number 1, I chose the jerkbait. Now the jerkbait for a few years was never a bait that I actually threw a lot, but it really started coming through and shining for me in the last year or two, specifically in the springtime. When that ice first comes off and it's still pretty cold, and even up to now in April and May, I love fishing a jerkbait. You can get super reactive with it when the bass are super reactive, when they're super aggressive, but also, when those fish are just more lethargic, it is an awesome bait for triggering bass, even when they don't want to bite. Just jerk and just quickly pause it. Fish will come up. Oops. That was not supposed to happen. But when you're twitching aggressive, those bass will come up to look at it. They'll look at it. That next jerk, so corresponds. They're on it. So, bait 1, I chose the jerkbait. Alright guys, so bait number 2 is spinnerbait. The spinnerbait is absolutely one of my #1 search baits at any time of year. Ever since I've just started bass fishing, it was always one of my confidence baits. This is the bait that held my PB for a long time. Come in all different shapes, sizes, colors. Bluegill ones are where I usually start in the springtime. But the spinnerbait is just one of those search baits. It always continues to work. No matter if I'm in a super tiny pond, I'll throw little ones. I got little Booyah Pond magic. Or if I'm in bigger bodies of water, just seems like no matter where I go, the spinnerbait in the springtime is always a bait that those bass will hit. Especially when the water has a little bit more chop to it, or if it's a little muddy, spinnerbait puts out a lot of vibration, and even in clear water, I sometimes smash them on the spinnerbait. For bait number 3, and this is the only bait that I chose a bottom bait for, is the jig. Now the jig, come on, spring bass fishing, jigs, or really any kind of bass fishing, any time of year, jig is something you have to be throwing. Now, the jig, the reason why I chose this as my only bottom bait is a lot of time when I want to slow down, there are tons of baits you can throw. You can throw finesse baits, but especially in the springtime, you're looking to get that big bite, and a jig, I don't know, you cannot argue with the power of a jig when it comes to big fish. In the springtime, if I'm dragging a bait on the bottom and I'm trying to catch a big one, it's absolutely going to be a jig. I have caught so many big, giant springtime bass on the jig, and even if you want to downsize a little bit, throw like a little bit more of a finessey jig, just that jig profile, it always gets a big bite for me, no matter where I am in the state or whether I'm fishing, again, ponds or lakes. Jig is always one of my #1 choices for spring bass fishing. Alright, so staying with jigs for a second, bait number 4 is going to be the swim jig. Now, I don't know if I want to say, but I'm pretty sure if I'd have to choose one bait, just one, for springtime, it would probably be a swim jig. Probably in a blue color like that too. Especially in the springtime when the bass are starting to move up on beds. One of their main things that they eat and just hate, they will mow bluegill down all throughout the spring, and I love throwing swim baits, bear swim baits, but the power of a swim jig, it gives that secondary action, gives a little more bulk, and it's a little more realism that, for me, it lets you cover a bunch of water. It's super realistic, and just like that jig I talked about before, it usually seems to get me big bites. In the springtime, I usually like to stick into bluegill colors, green pumpkins. That's my favorite springtime jig, little dirty jigs in the bluegill color. But the swim jig just always seems to prevail for me. And almost every single year, this bait gets me a few big ones during the spring months. So bait 4, swim jig. We got one more. Alright, last, but certainly not least, I chose the underspin. Now, the underspin is a bait that I really latched onto in the past few years, just like a few of the other ones that I was talking about. And the underspin, I've caught fish all time throughout the year. I've caught fish in the summer. It's usually not a very traditional summertime bait, but I've caught it in the summer, I've caught it in the winter, I've caught it in the fall, I've caught it in the spring. But to me, fall and mostly springtime is when I do the best on underspin. Underspin, just another great search bait. And the thing that I love about it is how versatile underspin is. So you can get weedless underspins like this, a little bigger one with the Keitech, or you can get heavier ones like that little Blade Runner that gets down to the bottom. You can fish the entire water column. You can fish up in cover, or you can fish down, just bumping along the bottom when that water's still super cold. And I mean, my second biggest bass ever came on an underspin. I always seem, a lot of times, I also love fishing underspins around rocks and not heavy grass. Grass, I usually tend towards that swim jig, but the underspin, I love throwing around little like sparse grass and rocks. A lot in rocks, you can just bump this thing along the bottom, and those fish are, it can be still super cold out. One of my best days this spring, the water was in the low 40s, and I was smashing them on underspin. I got so many fish on here on this, and some good ones. So, bait number 5, I chose the underspin. Alright guys, so that's gonna do it for today's episode. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment down below, and we'll see you in the next video.